What's up, everybody? Welcome to From the Archive, the series in which I'm going to go through my personal stash, an archive of books, whether it's wargame related or not, and pick one and share it with you all, like talk about it, things of that nature. Over the years of being, a nerd and into this hobby and whatnot, I've amassed a collection of books, and for one reason or another, I tend to keep them, and whether or not I even really enjoy them, I just tend to keep them because I like physical, tangible books on stuff. And a lot of these books, pretty much all these books you're looking at here in one way or another, has helped shape my personal tastes, thoughts, and ideas when it comes to collecting miniatures in this wargaming hobby, maybe as direct inspiration or just something in the back of my mind. So I thought it would be cool as I unpack these things to share them with you. So what I'm going to do in each ramble, I'm going to pick one book kind of haphazardly, and I'm gonna go sit down at the table with you, and we're gonna look through it. I'm gonna give a basic thought synopsis on it, share my opinions on it, break it down a little bit, maybe look inside of it a little, and just talk about it, whether it's a novel, a codex, or a tabletop RPG book or whatever. So some of these books I have multiples of for some reason, not really sure why. Other books I do not, and it's just going to be some fun. I thought it'd be cool to kind of get some insight, perhaps, and share my thoughts on stuff that I have in my small little personal collection here, and for you all to share your thoughts as well on what I'm looking at when it comes to the book in question. What you have? Do you have the same book? What are your thoughts on it? And things like that. So this should be a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab one of these books, and I'll meet you at the table. Welcome back to the table, and welcome to another episode of From the Archive. This is the penultimate episode of Season 2, so it's the final episode of Season 2 for a 40k related ramble. So I thought I'd bust out something special, something a little divisive, the special edition collector's set of Ultramarines, a Warhammer 40,000 movie. GW's first 40k movie ever. And this came out in 2010, and I think it's alright. I think it's average. I think it's fine. I don't think it's bad by any stretch. And I do think it's judged a little harshly, and it's not just fan service, fanboying it or anything like that. I really do think it's fine. It's average. There's nothing crazy to write home about, but I don't think it's anywhere near some of the more harsh and toxic reviews of it. And I do have a thought as to why, but we'll get to that as we do this ramble. So being the last of Season 2 for a 40k related thing, it's going to take as long as it needs to. I'm not going to curb what I want to ramble about, so it might go a little long for sure here. But 2010, this came out from Codex Pictures, and to put it into perspective, Dawn of War 2 came out, I think, late 2008, early 2009. 5th edition of the Space Marine Codex came out in 2008, so we're in that type of territory. This features Ultramarines' second company, and that's important, and I'll come back as to why, because I think that ruffles some feathers. And it's a movie about showcasing, featuring the Ultramarines. The plot is they are responding to a call for aid from Imperial fists on a shrine world. It comes under attack by chaos, and the Ultramarines show up to see the aftermath, because they didn't know exactly what happened, and then they discern chaos threat. They deal with it, they encounter Imperial Fist survivors, they briefly lose contact with their captain, who takes a tumble with a demon prince, and then typical chaos plot, okay, who's the traitor, happens. The stereotypical chaos plot concept. That way, when you're not dealing with an army versus army, you're dealing with a smaller, more intimate cast, that tends to be the plot, right? So that ensues. And that's your basic rundown of the setup for the Ultramarines movie. With that said, before I go any further, this is a special edition collector's set, so it's got this sleeve that this is in, and this includes a 2-disc steelbook case, which has the Ultramarines movie in one and bonus content in the other. Legacy, bringing the 40K universe to the screen, is part of the bonus content, as well as the blueprint of battle, creating the script. The squad is about the cast. The art of war is the design and artwork for the first ever full-length Warhammer 40K movie. And then Soundscape is all about the sound effects and musical score. So, when you slide things out of this box, and that's the back of it there, and I guess I'll show you the back of this here. This is the front, that's the back. You get your steel book. This is where those 2 discs are. The movie disc and the bonus content disc. Ultramarines, a Warhammer 40,000 movie. Then you have hard choices. This also is part of the collector's set. What happened on Algol? Algol is a planet that they were on prior to the events of the movie. So this kind of is a little back information for the cast of the movie, which, okay, you know, whatever. Tyranids and stuff, and written by Dan Abnett and whatnot. Decent artwork. Basic graphic novel type concept. Not bad. You don't really need it, but I will be bringing it up as far as, you know, the fact that it exists at all. Because I'm going to be talking about this particular setup for the movie. Now, this came out in 2010, like I mentioned, 2009, or late 2008, 2009, Dawn of War 2, 2008, Ultramarines had more characters come out in the 5th edition of the Space Marine Codex. So, a decade old. First thing, visually, how does it hold up? Before I go over my thoughts and why I think it's being judged a bit too harshly by people. Well, visually, I think it holds up just fine. Power armor looks good. It doesn't feel very pixelated or anything like that. It really looks fine. It gets the point across. The bolters look great. All the art assets are drawn straight from the miniatures. So the Demon Prince enemy, right, looks like that era of the model. Just made CGI. That's not a bad thing, but it's just keep in mind, we're looking at a 2010 landscape for inspiration for things. Everything looks great that way. The facial expressions are done well. The faces are fine. They're 2010 faces that maybe could have been given once more over for some polish, but I don't think are really that bad, truthfully. At least that's my opinion. They just feel older than what they're supposed to in some cases. The apothecary is supposed to be a craggy, grizzled veteran, but the squad is meant to be a more recent squad. It's basically a new, fully fledged Battle Brothers squad for Second Company, and therefore they probably should be a bit more smooth-faced. But we all also talking about transhuman super soldier space marines who have a long training process and is arduous. So there is that too. Anyways, the faces, I think, at the end of the day are fine. Just, you could always like them to be a bit sharper. And we're always more harshly critical of human-type faces, of which Space Marines have, being transhuman super soldiers, because we're used to seeing them every day. So we're really very critical and instantly point out any type of flaw or suspicion because of that. How's the backdrop? The settings? That is where we get real hit or miss situations. When you're on board the starship, the Ultramarine ship, when you're by some of the Imperial ruins and whatnot, it's fantastic. Stained glass, whenever you see stained glass in the movie, is done really well. Some of the ruins and other structure and architecture and technology stuff done very well. Then you have like dusty rock out crag type stuff that feels relatively bare bones basic and almost like in a haze in the background to kind of keep the skybox, if you will, basic and simple and not overly complicated. So it's a lot of hit or miss. There's peaks and valleys when it comes to the setting backdrop for it and how well it's done. But it's never done bad. It's just sometimes you look at it and you go, that's a little plain. Sound effects, soundscape, the musical score, the voice acting, and the sound effects are all the strongest points of this movie and all done top notch. The voice acting, fantastic. I mean, one of the big things is Terrence Stamp is one of the voice actors. You know, that's kind of a big deal for people. But yeah, the voice acting top notch. The sound effects, fantastic. The musical score really helps set the tone of everything that's going on. The soundscape of this movie is its best part for sure in terms of quality when you break it down that way. But the end result is something that is strictly average. It's fair, it's average, it is somewhat a little forgettable. And this is the unforgivable sin, I think, for a lot of people. I think they look at this and they expect being 40K, and 40K is very over the top for everything, being a Space Marine driven movie, the poster child of 40K is Space Marines, and being Ultramarines, no less, the poster child of Space Marines as they are, there was a lot of expectation to live up to for people, it seems. Now, I love Ultramarines. I know they got a lot of memes, a lot of hate, but I think they're a fantastic chapter. They're awesome. They're a perfect chapter to use in something like this. So that doesn't bother me. But I understand where people are coming from in terms of why they're judging this so harshly. When nothing can be strictly average in 40K, right? It's not allowed. Strictly average is a fail in a lot of people's eyes. I get it. I don't personally agree with the concept, but I get what they're going for and what they're talking about. So this movie, honestly, isn't bad. If it was, obviously didn't say Ultramarines, didn't have the Ultramarine symbol, and wasn't clearly Space Marine power, but if it was of this quality, but for some other IP or a brand new IP, it would be considered average, and people would go, huh, alright, whatever. But because it's 40K and Space Marines and Ultramarines, I think the fan base really had a cliff face worth of expectations that this had to scale. And that's one of the issues with such a popular setup like this, is that the expectations can sometimes almost feel unrealistic to live up to. But I'm not trying to make excuses or anything like that. It is a strictly average, passable, average, a little forgettable product. And that, I think, is why it's judged so harshly, because it's a 40K product like that. Anyways, with that said, there are a couple of things that I think, if changed or at least addressed, with one being a huge change, would have really helped this movie out. So I want to go over that. I'm not going to go over the plot too much or anything in that regard. It's a typical chaos plot, like I believe I already mentioned. A small, more intimate chaos plot is who's the secret traitor, whether it's been all along or recently corrupted since we got here. That's the level of plot we're looking at. But first things first, no problem with the Ultramarines being the focal point, like I already mentioned. It makes sense, and they look great. But why is it always Ultramarines Second Company? Unless it's the Uriel Ventress novel series, which is Fourth Company, it's always Second Company. And I say this because it's only natural to expect Sicarius if we're going to have a captain, right? But it's not. It's Captain Severus, whose name isn't brand new for this movie. I definitely remember prior to that, or can recall it being something that's been established in the past. But that puts us somewhere in the timeline that we're not really sure where we're at, right? So that's problematic. And it's problematic because back in 2008, we got Cato Sicarius. Again, spawns a bunch of memes. I think he's a fantastic character. I'm a big fan of him. He becomes an entry in the 5th edition Space Marine Codex. He's been Second Company captain for some time, fluff-wise, prior to 5th edition. The Medusa 5 campaign, he's named in there as a character. He comes up, he's a captain of Second Company then. He just didn't have an entry or anything. So, if I recall. But anyways, my point is, we've known about him before 5th edition Codex. So, he's the captain. If you were told that making an Ultramarines movie that's going to showcase Second Company, you would be expecting Sicarius, even if he's not part of the main cast of characters, even if he just sends the squad out, you expect to have seen him. But it has nothing to do with him at all. Just like the Space Marine game had nothing to do with him, and it was Ultramarine Second Company. It becomes this weird case that now automatically the fan base is trying to figure out where does this fit in the timeline. And that's not something you want to have happen. And just saying, oh, it's an alternate universe movie timeline, has nothing to do with the main lore of 40K, is a bit of a bummer too. So I think that is annoying. Not a huge thing, but I think if it was third company, you could still have the gold Ultramarine symbol on the helmet that we're seeing here. Just have red on the shoulder pads. Or you can do fifth company, have black on the shoulder pads. Whatever. Fourth is green. What my point is, that little change, I think, would have immediately had that little speed bump not exist. The big change, though, is the plot of this whole movie, and it involving chaos. If we had that gone, and I get why it does, and I'll come back to that, but if we had it gone, and instead if it was something very typical, we'll just say orcs, right? Orcs are a fantastic antagonist force to throw into a movie, right? You don't have to develop some crazy deep plot about what they're trying to do. You don't have to with anything, but you really don't have to with the orcs, and nobody really care at all. We don't need to have crazy knowledge base about the orcs either. They're orcs in space. They love a good fight, right? They fit into very much any scenario. And they're great at showcasing how they're a threat and why they're a threat, but they're also a really good force to showcase how powerful the protagonists are, in the case of them being Space Marines. When we think Space Marine, they're transhuman super soldiers, and whether or not you're a fan of them, the capabilities fluff-wise, we know what they are. And even if you're not a fan, if you heard about a 40K movie focused on the Ultramarines chapter, you would expect to see showcased that ability. The problem is when your foe is of equal caliber, literally because they're just heretic Astartes, it nullifies all that and it becomes standard feeling. It doesn't feel crazy. It doesn't do much for you. When you're firing a gun that can, blow holes in flesh and tear things apart and is ruthless, and your strength and speed is ruthless and capability with your chainsaw is ruthless, but all of that is nullified by your power armor that you're shooting at the enemy because they have the same power armor on, it loses gravitas for sure. Now, if we're talking 2010, I imagine doing a green skin horde of orcs in a movie like this would have been much more difficult than taking the art asset of Space Marine armor and making it chaosy. Space Marine power armor, I imagine it's hard armor pieces. It's probably, in the realm of CGI stuff, relatively easy to do and have look good compared to soft fleshy stuff and soft cloth. And the ramshackle nature of the orcs probably be a bit of a nightmare. But I think if they were able to pull that off, I think you could have pulled off Orcs 2010 without real issue. In terms of quality of look, I just think it would have been a much more intensive project. But I think if that was the case, and it was a whole different plot, because now you don't have the chaos plot of who's corrupted, instead you just have get in there, fight your way through, find the survivors, extraction plot, which is fine. I think if you have that, instead, it would be able to showcase the brutality of the orcs and the capabilities of Astartes and really be a fun fan service film, which is kind of what this was thought to be by the fan base anyway, or attempting to be. And what you can do then also, because orcs are fairly big and brutish, you could have in the opening scenes when we see the opening devastation of the attack on the Shrine World, you could have some PDF militia forces fighting with the Space Marines fighting in the background too. So you can have them near Space Marines to show how big Space Marines are, and near orcs to show how big orcs are. But now we get the establishment that these things are larger than life normally. We get it for the rest of the movie, and we can see how brutal the orcs are against some of those PDF militia forces. So when we see the protagonists of the Ultramarines doing their whole plot and that theoretical plot setup, it would be, man, they're facing some brutal forces. Look at their brutality as well, and it just, I think, hypes up both sides while still letting the Space Marines be all Space Marine as we expect them in the fluff, right? More so than facing literally your heretic versions of yourself. So that's just me though, but I think if it did that, it would be a different plot entirely. But I think it would have been more fun and more forgivable, and probably more well received, because we're getting the fan service bolter porn in essence that we wanted to see. Outside of that, the one thing that was particularly jarring for me were basically some gear in this movie. The banner of the Ultramarines and the Crozius Arcanum of the Imperial Fist. Not because they are wackadoo out there beyond the scope of 40k, not at all. Just because we really didn't get any real setup to prepare ourselves for it. The banner less so, it just seemed a little convenient, but whatever. A little explanation would have been better. And they tried to give it, but I think just setting it up before it happened would have been, better. And then the Crozius Arcanum is a big one, though. There is an Imperial Fist chaplain character. He has a Crozius, as you do when you're a chaplain. We know what that is. It's a mace-type weapon. We understand that. GW understands that. This is done with GW. This is GW's first 40k movie. So the fact that it doesn't act like a normal Crozius at all is not a mistake. Some people say, oh, they made a big mistake. No. Stop being jaded. They didn't make a mistake. The problem is, they didn't set up at all. They did some type of special relic Crozius, which is probably what it is. If we're going to explain it away, it's some type of special war gear Crozius, which is cool. But it does some weird range attack thing, and we're left scratching our heads when you first see it as a fan base going, wait a minute, what the heck just happened? A surprise like that isn't good, generally. We need some understanding that we're not looking at your standard chaplain in that regard, or something, right? Or a standard Crozius. Just some type of explanation, or having it look a bit more unique or something would have helped. So that was just a little jarring and takes you back out of the movie for a moment, going, hey, wait a minute, racking your head around it, what's going on. Outside of all that, though, like I said, it's a fair, average movie. But there's just, I think, was too much writing on this in the fan base's eyes, being the first 40k film, that it got picked apart. And I'm not trying to say it deserves better necessarily, because it is strictly average, and I'm not trying to hype it up to be anything more. Really, there's no need to. It's an average thing that you can take it or leave it and have nothing really lost from your experience as a 40k fan. But really, outside of that, and some of the terrainscape could have been done better. Stained glass, Imperium ruins and ships and stuff like that are done very well. The power armor is done very well. Basically, everything that has a miniature asset is fantastic. And then some of the terrainscape around them is a little lackluster. So, at the end of the day, I encourage you to see if you can check it out for free online. You probably can, if you are curious at all. Just have 2010 in mind. And I say that because we have some fantastic fan films of late in recent time, 2018 and onwards. A Star Taste, one-person project, pretty much fantastic. There's some other ones out there as well that look really good. And I'm not taking anything away from them, but it is 2020 or a couple of years, 2018 to 2020 level tech that they'd be able to make use of for those assets. It's a different story, and as you know with computer stuff, 10 years is a long time, right? So I'm not trying to take anything away from all the fan film projects. This did have a big budget and a team, so it's kind of like, well, why couldn't they really step it up? I'm not trying to take anything away from it, though. What I will say is this. Comparing it to the Dawn of War 2 opening cinematic in terms of quality and look of everything, I get why. It's right close to each other, and I get it, two different teams with the budget and everything working on stuff. But I still think doing a 70-plus minute runtime CGI thing over a 2-minute cinematic is a whole different beast. I have to imagine, not being one to have ever done it. It just feels like it would be a whole different beast. You have plot and dialogue and character development and things to consider, and getting it all done and everything else that way, and transitioning into different points of the movie to different settings and whatnot, versus a 2-minute intro cinematic to get you hyped for a game, right? So there is some difference there. And I think the quality is fine, and I'm right near that Dawn of War 2 cinematic, which is a fantastic cinematic, which is why I think, people compare it. Came out 2009, I think. This came out 2010. Why wouldn't you compare it? Anyways, with all that said, I've been rambling on and repeating myself. I am not someone who thinks this is awful. I think it's strictly okay, which is awful for a lot of people, right? Because this is 40K we're talking about. But it was a fun 70-ish minutes of time that I've done several times watching this. I think that they definitely took notes on how this went and was received and the production of it, and I definitely think the stuff we're seeing happen now isn't necessarily a direct evolution from Ultramarines movie, but no doubt lessons learned here went into some of the official stuff to come. So that's cool. Anyways, with that said, have you seen this movie? Do you own it? What are your thoughts? Do you think it's terror bad, or are you more like me thinking, it's all right? Share it in the comment section. Thanks very much for stopping by. The next episode for From the Archive is going to be the last of Season 2, so stay tuned for that. And until next time, take it easy.